ECG, sir.
Right. We'll ask one of the other people to talk to us. Who wants to comment on this ECG? Volunteers, please. No takers? Come on, you people should not be afraid of presenting. But the more mistakes you do, the better it is. This is the best time to do mistakes.
Shall I take it up, sir?
Okay, go ahead.
12-lead ECG with normal standardization. Patient is in sinus rhythm with a heart rate of around 60 beats per minute. A normal axis, QRS axis. And there is segment depression in AVR, which is more than in V1, and in ST segment depression in V3 to V6, 2-3 AVF.
Okay.
Probably a left main coronary artery disease or a triple vessel disease in the background of chest pain for 2 hours with a known diabetes and the chronic smoker.
You should not talk left main and the 3 vessel. You seeing the left main here? Don't talk like that. You should talk of, what you mean is large area of ischemia or global ischemia. That's what you mean, isn't it?
Okay, sir. Sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
See, when you say left main disease, you're specifically making an anatomical diagnosis, which is not correct. ECG doesn't give you an anatomical diagnosis. So what you're indicating is widespread ST depression with ST elevation in AVR, suggesting that it could be a large area of ischemia or global ischemia. That's what you mean, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So better not to use the word left main or 3 vessel disease. It's a large area of ischemia indicating global involvement, global ischemia. That's the right term to use.
Yes.
Which could be due to left main disease, which could be due to 3 vessel disease also. Okay?
Yes,
so,
sir.
Ischemia or infarction? What would you say? Infarction or ischemia?
For infarction, there should be Q waves. It is all ST segment changes, which is denoting injury or ischemia, sir. So
But you said ST elevation in AVR. Transmural infarcted, you ST segment elevation. Well, you said ST elevation in AVR, no? So why don't you say infarction then? Surya? No, not Surya. You know the diagnosis. Somebody else? Do you want to diagnose? She has said global ischemia. I agree with that. But I am asking, why can't it be infarction? Because AVR is showing ST elevation. Amadan? The deviation of ST segment, elevation or depression, is a matter of which lead you are looking at. Basically, the ST segment goes opposite to the direction of the main QRS complex in cases of reversible ischemia, electrolyte imbalance, all those things. So, you look for ST depression in leads where the R wave is predominantly upright. And in leads which are predominantly downward, ischemia would be manifest by ST elevation. Am I right?
Yes. Yes, sir.
So, the significance of ST changes depends upon the predominant direction of the QRS complex. Now in AVR, normally the QRS complex is downwards. So when you have ischemia, the ST segment will go upwards. It doesn't necessarily mean infarction. Do you get that?
Yes, sir.
If you get ST elevation in standard lead 1 or V5, V6, then it is more suggestive of infarction. But in AVR, it is going opposite to the QRS complex. Therefore, it is probably still suggestive of ischemia, may not be infarction. So, okay, so what will you do for this patient? So, you're diagnosing global ischemia, 2 hours of chest pain. Now, what will you do?
Hello.
Can it be pericarditis?
Doesn't check from Please
It is not a PR segment elevation in AVR with global depression, sir. So, and tachycardia, sinus tachycardia, like mostly pericarditis will have sinus tachycardia along with it.
So, pericarditis produces ST elevation in which leads? PR segment elevation, which leads?
AVR PR segment elevation and global PR depression.
No, what happens to ST segment? What happens to ST segment in acute pericarditis?
It will produce K elevation globe.
Oh, your voice is breaking. Say that again.
It will produce K elevation globally, sir.
Global ST elevation. So how do you differentiate from infarction then?
Yes, so usually infarction will associate with concave ST elevation, sir. Convex ST elevation will be there, sir. Convex
Okay.
upward. While
Okay.
pericarditis will be concave upwards.
Okay.
PR segment depression in all the except for AVR
Uh-huh.
in pericarditis.
Uh-huh.
There will be sinus tachycardia, sir.
Okay. Okay. What else? You're right. So far you're right. But tell me some more point.
Go back and answer this problem. There will be territorial.
The ST segment elevation in infarction is territorial. That means it will be either anterior or it will be inferior like that. Whereas in pericarditis, it will be generalized,
Okay, sir.
crossing territorial borders. There will not be any reciprocal changes in pericarditis, whereas in infarction, you can get reciprocal changes. Serial follow-up will tell you evolution of Q waves in infarction, whereas in pericarditis, it may resolve. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Right. So it doesn't suggest pericarditis. It doesn't suggest infarction. So we are left with ischemia. Any other cause of ST changes you are aware of? What about electrolyte imbalance? Maybe he has got hypokalemia. Hypocalcemia, something. Can it be? Who was talking? Lendri was talking, no? Who was presenting earlier?
Shailendra, sir.
Yeah, she's. Would you consider maybe these ST segment changes are due to electrolyte imbalance? Would you consider that? Not there? Okay, anybody please, anybody, come on, quick.
Sir, electrolyte imbalance like hypokalemia will be associated with more like stretching of the QRS segment. There will be QT prolongation.
Okay.
And can be associated with bradycardia, but usually there will be QT prolongation.
Okay. Now your answer should be, in a patient who is having acute chest pain for 2 hours, the only diagnosis I will entertain is ischemia unless it is proved otherwise.
Okay, sir.
Okay. When a patient is having chest pain, do you think of hypokalemia as a diagnosis? Surya, your mic is making a lot of noise. I don't know whose mic. I think Surya's mic is on. And okay. Okay, that's much better now. Okay. So in a patient who has chest pain, the first diagnosis should always be ischemia. And you think of only when ischemia has been excluded, you think of hypokalemia and all other conditions. Okay, you don't think of those conditions right in the beginning. So what will you do now? What is the next step?
Sir, to assess the first vital signs, sir, hemodynamics,
Okay.
the blood pressure,
Yeah,
the
quickly,
parameters,
vital signs.
and,
Okay, go on.
and to secure an IV line, and then if blood pressures are good, we can go ahead giving some IV morphine or sublingual nitrates to relieve his pain, along with antiplatelets and statins.
Okay.
And have to take him up for an immediate angiogram with revascularization to the cath lab. If the hemodynamically is unstable or blood pressures are on the borderline, we may need to think of securing an intra-aortic balloon pump prior to taking up for an angiogram.
Okay. No, that comes subsequently. First thing would be to decide whether this really is ischemia. So I think you would, if the hemodynamics are stable and blood pressure is good, you probably start nitrate in infusion and give him some pain relief with morphine, give him oxygen, stabilize the patient, and then you will repeat an ECG.
But,
That's the sentence
okay.
I wanted. Meanwhile,
Okay, sir.
you would have sent a troponin already. You haven't sent troponin at all. You're taking him to cath lab without doing troponin? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so those
Yes,
are the
sir.
things I want.
Cardio.
Okay. One is serial changes. The ECG is very important. Even 10 minutes, 15 minutes interval, you should do ECGs to see whether these changes are progressing or regressing and what's happening. One. Two, you urgently send for a troponin. Okay. And then,
Yes,
of
sir.
course, you carry on. Okay, Surya, come on. Will you tell us what you want to say?
Yes, sir. This ECG is classical sign of Day Winter's sign, sir, which is actually in 2008 there is a case series by Day Winters who studied 1,530 patients with ECG changes, and they found that 2% of the patient with this kind of ECG had LAD occlusion, sir. They consider it as TEMI equivalent. Their description was like J-point upsloping ST segment more than 1 mm in precordial leads with prominent T waves, symmetrical T waves, and absence of ST elevation in precordial leads with 0.5 to 1 mm ST segment elevation in AVR. And everything is fitting into our ECG, sir. And this patient had Day Winter's sign ECG, and echo also showed mild LV dysfunction with regional wall motion abnormality in LAD territory, sir. Predominantly
So it's a sign of proximal LAD occlusion.
Proximal LAD occlusion, sir. Yes, sir. Day Winter's sign. Day Winter's pattern of ECG.
So tell us the characteristic finding of D. It's actually D, not day. D Winters.
Yes, sir. D Winters. D Winters.
Tell us the ECG. Yes. Prominent
Symmetrical T wave in precordial leads.
Okay.
With upsloping ST segment more than 1 mm, sir. J point upsloping ST segment more than 1 mm in precordial leads.
Yes. You can see that mild ST elevation V1, V2.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And absence of ST elevation in precordial leads, sir. There is no any significant ST elevation in precordial leads. AVR, there is 0.5 to 1 mm ST elevation. There, sir. So everything is pointing towards Day Winters. And D Winters. We have taken him for angiogram, sir, subsequently the next day, which showed a proximal LAD of 90% disease, sir. We've taken him for ad hoc PTCA, and we have it was a single vessel disease, sir. Long LAD, type 3 LAD. We have stented the LAD then itself, sir.
Okay. So Now, silently, do you realize now, no, instead of talking about left main and three vessel disease and all, what you really have got is widespread ST changes with ST elevation in AVR. That's what you have. Okay. So,
Yes,
I
sir.
think you would have been far safer to say a major area of myocardial ischemia, which includes left main, three vessel disease and proximal LAD disease, all three. Okay, that is a much safer diagnosis. Okay, even if you are not able to identify specifically the D winter ECG, you will be much safer to just say that it is a large area of ischemia. And large area of ischemia usually would be only the left coronary system. It cannot be in the right coronary system. Therefore, it's either bilateral or trivial disease or left main LAD disease causing a major area of left ventricular ischemia. So you did ad hoc PTCA next day.
Yes, sir.
But that day what happened? The day he arrived.
The day we gave loading dose and along with that subcutaneous morphine, sir. After that, his pain has settled down. We sent a COVID test immediately, and we thought of taking him for primary PCA if he has a recurrent chest pain, sir. But since his pain has settled down, we waited for the COVID reports to come, and we have taken him for ad hoc PTCA on the subsequent day, sir.
Okay.
Turns out to be a single vessel disease.
So the question I would have asked you is, suppose this had not been a corona pandemic period, you probably would have taken him for an angio straight away, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have planned
But
for primary.
the moment you diagnose the major ischemia in the form of LAD occlusion or left main occlusion or three vessel disease, a patient having 2 hours chest pain, I think you probably would have preferred to take him for angiogram the night itself if it was not for corona test.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I will show the subsequent ECG, sir.
Yeah,
The
please,
importance of repeating the ECG.
Yeah, do that. You did the
Okay.
ECG before you
Yes,
went
sir.
for angiogram?
Yes, sir. This
Oh,
is the
good.
repeat
Okay,
ECG.
this is
sir.
what I wanted.
This is the repeat ECG, sir. Taken after half an hour.
See, now he is showing coving of ST segment in the precordial lead V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, even up to V6 is showing coving. I don't remember. Did he lose R waves in V2, V3? I don't know.
Yes, sir. V3 there is a loss, sir.
Yes. So now he is developing an anti-wall infarction pattern. Can you see ST segment elevation coving is there. Now R waves are being lost in V2, V3. Therefore, he is developing into an anti-wall infarction. And at this stage, probably AVR ST elevation is gone. Even one is showing a little ST coving, one AVL. Yeah, that. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, and what happened after the angioplasty?
After the angioplasty, it was similar ECG on the subsequent day also, sir. And he is supposed to come for follow-up next week, sir.
Okay.
If I get an ECG, I will project it, sir.
Okay.
The repeat ECG.
Good. That's a very interesting one. Can you send that ECG to me? Just for my
Sure, sir.
teaching
Sure, sir.
collection.
Definitely, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Right. So that's good. Now, in fact, I want to tell all of you, if anybody come across any interesting ECG, X-ray, echo, CT, anything you have in your hospital, please bring it to us. And it'll be a good idea to discuss in the group. So definitely you should bring presentations like that. Okay, Gokul back or not?
I will contact him now, sir. I will call him back.
Or he can send the presentation to one of you and he can log in and just talk.
He has some problem in playing echo video, sir. He has sent me the presentation. I am
Okay,
trying
forget
to
the
open
video. No, we are
sir.
getting
He'll
late.
start-
Let him forget the video. Then without the video, just the rest of it he can talk. No,
Yes, sir.
because we are wasting time. Otherwise, we'll lose interest. So let him present without the video. So you present the slide. Let him talk.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can see the slide now.
Yes. Is it visible, sir?
Yeah, visible.
Yes, sir.
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. Sorry, sir, for the delay.
Yeah, no problem.
Uh,
Gokul, just a suggestion.
yes.
See, one of the things in cardiology training is also being able to do a webinar. So now, what you should do is, if you are, it applies to all of you. I'm not finding fault with you, but what you should do is, you should, in fact, if you're doing it for the first time or something, no, you should do a test run before. You knew that you are going to present today. You should have asked Amazon or somebody or me or anybody, that can I do a test run and just want to try out my slide once on BlueJean? Then we will just set it up for 5-10 minutes and then do a test presentation today morning sometime. And then the actual presentation will go through without hitch.
Yes.
This is one of the lessons for you today. I think I'm not upset that you are getting delayed, because this is a lesson, important lesson for you. Tomorrow you will go to present in a very important talk in a very major symposium, some international symposium, and that time your slides will fail. And you will look very embarrassed.
Sorry.
So, one lesson you have learned today, all of you, is that if you have a presentation, always take a test run the day before or the morning of this thing. Don't assume that everything will work. Okay?
Okay, sir. I'll start, sir.
Right, start.
Mr. Anandan, a 26-year-old male patient coming from low socioeconomic status community, hailing from Nagapattinam. Patient's history starts at the age of 6 years, so I would like to start the history at the 6 years of age. Patient had a history of fever and joint pains, for which he was initially admitted in GH for 1 week, and he was given IV medications and oral medications, and he was told to have some heart valve disease, and so he was admitted, and he was discharged in 1 week, and he was advised to continue medications, and periodic injections also he was advised, but patient was not compliant with medications. Patient was asymptomatic for next 2 years. When he grew up to 8 years of age, again patient developed exertional dyspnea. He was not able to play with his peers in the school, and patient was not on any medication and did not seek medical help, and he continued to go to school and continue his activity. And his dyspnea worsened over the next 1 to 2 months, and he was forced to discontinue the school. So his dyspnea progressed. He was also having a history of exertional palpitations, and he was also having history of fatigue. Next slide, sir. So the patient was advised. So patient at that point he sought medical help, and he came to us and he was diagnosed to have some valve problem, and he underwent valve surgery in 2005. His post-op period was uneventful, and he was advised medications. And one medication he knew was diuretics, but he was not prescribed any anticoagulants. So patient continued to take medications this time, and he was asymptomatic till his schooling of around till age of 18 years. At 18 years of age, he started to go to work, and while going for work, he found again difficulty in breathing. So he takes diuretic medication on and off when he feels breathless, and he doesn't seek medical help for those symptoms. Again, his dyspnea continued to worsen, and he is not able to continue his occupation as a fisherman. So he is forced to switch to another job as an auto driver. But for the past 6 months, patient has dyspnea has again worsened. Patient is not even able to do his personal activities. And for the past 3 months, next slide, sir. For the past 3 months, patient is having complaints of jaundice, abdominal distension, and swelling of both the lower limbs. And he is also having undue fatigue. And he is also complaining of palpitations, which are exertional. The palpitations are regular, slow in onset and slow in offset. It's not associated with presyncope or syncope. There is no history of reduced output or chest pain. There is no history of recurrent LRA or cyanotic spells or squatting in childhood. And there is no history of joint pains, fever or sore throat. There is no history of limb weakness or slurring of speech now. There is no history of hoarseness of voice or dysphagia. Next slide. Past history. So he gives a history of probably rheumatic fever in childhood, but he was on irregular medications. And he has underwent cardiac valve surgery in 2005. One valve was replaced and other was repaired. That's what he says. And he was advised medications including diuretics. No other known comorbidities are present. And family history. He's a second-born child of a non-consanguineous parents, and there is no significant family history. Personal history is unmarried and is not an alcoholic or a smoker.
Okay, fairly good history, long. So can you just summarize that history for me in one short 2-3 sentences maximum? Summarize that history.
The 26-year-old male patient having initially left heart symptoms starting at around the age of 8 years, for which he underwent cardiac valve surgery and had an asymptomatic period of 10 years, and which again the left heart symptoms worsened for the past 6 months, which progressed for the last 3 months to involve the right heart symptoms like pedal edema and abdominal distension, jaundice.
Oh, that summary is becoming too long. No? It becoming like a long history again. So, a short summary means the important points are rheumatic fever at the age of 6 years, onset of symptoms at the age of 8 years, surgery around the age of around 11 to 12 years. And how do you know valve replacement and valve repair? He told you that?
He says he told one was repaired and one valve was replaced.
Okay, replacement. And then I thought he continued to have symptoms after surgery. You told me that he's continuously on diuretics.
He takes diuretics whenever he gets breathlessness. He is not regular on medications. Whenever he
So that means he was never free of dyspnea even after operation.
First 10 years till his schooling, he was not having any issues. Sir. After his school, around 18 years, when he started to go to job,
Okay.
he used to have dyspnea now and then.
More recently worsening of symptoms and now features of right heart failure. That's what you said.
Yes.
Okay. Right, that's fairly okay. Now, what do you think was done to him? What operation?
So he would have probably presented with heart failure initially. So regurgitant lesions could be possible.
Now, come on, regurgitant lesions. What? That's a very, very vague answer, no?
Mitral
I'm asking you what operation could have been done. You're telling me some regurgitation lesion. I don't understand.
Probably mitral valve could have been replaced.
Look, my question is not a casual question. I'm a very serious question. I'm asking. Your answers are casual. See, from your knowledge of frequency of valve involvement, rheumatic fever, and the age of the patient, I'm asking you which valve is likely to be involved. You're not answering that question.
Mitral valve.
Okay. Mitral valve alone, but he has surgery for 2 valves.
Yes, sir. Probably aortic valve.
So which valve do you think was changed? Which valve do you think was replaced? Which valve was replaced and which valve was repaired? I want to know. Can you guess what is likely?
Usually aorta would be replaced.
So what is the most common valve involved in the when the patient comes with acute rheumatic fever and in the early post-traumatic fever period?
Mitral valve usually.
So mitral valve is almost always involved.
Yes, sir.
And what is the most common lesion at that stage?
Mitral valvulitis causing MR.
No, mitral valvulitis is acute rheumatic fever. Post acute rheumatic. Also, MR is the most common inflammation is the most common hemodynamic problem in the early age group.
Yes, sir.
So why don't you say MR? The most likely first diagnosis must have been MR.
Yes, sir.
And the second most common valve which is involved in acute rheumatic fever and sequelae is AR, aortic regurgitation.
Yes.
Do you think it could have been aortic stenosis?
Unlikely.
Why? Why unlikely? Why? Rheumatic fever can cause aortic stenosis also.
It's,
No, why not? Why not mitral stenosis with aortic stenosis? Suppose I say like, so no, I think this boy had MS with AS. Is that possible?
Yes, sir. The patient has exceptional symptoms. It's possible.
So it's possible, no? He developed mitral stenosis with an aortic stenosis, so they had to replace one valve and open the other valve. Is that possible?
Yes, sir.
What do you think? And somebody else can answer my question. I am not happy with this answer.
No, sir. The regurgitant lesion is the first possibility, sir.
Why?
Stenotic lesion cannot be, sir, because
Why?
it
Why?
takes time for the stenotic lesion to develop.
Exactly. Aortic stenosis takes many years to develop. It cannot develop in a matter of 1 or 2 years. In fact, typically, aortic stenosis or rheumatic heart disease is told to present only by the 3rd or 4th decade of life.
Okay, sir.
Mitral stenosis can present a little early, and especially in India, juvenile mitral stenosis is known to come very early. It can come at the age of 10 years, 12 years even. Whereas aortic stenosis cannot happen that early. Therefore, the most likely diagnosis must be MR and AR, or there's a small possibility that is MS and AR. That's also possible. Mitral stenosis can develop early, but aortic lesion must have been aortic incompetence.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So you have to take the question seriously and answer according to the probability. Right. So one valve was done, but what valve was used to change the valve? No? What valve do you think was used?
Probably bioprosthetic valve, sir, because he was not advised any anticoagulation.
Okay. Do you think bioprosthetic valve is commonly used in children?
No, sir. But
In mitral position and aortic position, do you think it is commonly used?
no, sir. If it's
Why
undergo, it will be
Why-
degenerate earlier, sir.
Okay. Why does it degenerate earlier?
So the children, the hemodynamics, it will be in a hyperdynamic state, so it will be under constant wear and tear. So
Okay. And what else?
the patient will be growing, so
That applies to mechanical valve also growing. Because in a growing child, calcium metabolism is very rapid. So any extraneous tissue or dead tissue tends to get calcified very early in children.
yes,
So bioprosthetic valve is subject to much more hemodynamic trauma in children. Secondly, calcification is very early. That's why any homograft, any heterograft, any xenograft degenerates much faster in children. Therefore, one never uses the bioprosthetic valve in children as far as possible. And especially on the left side, we never use it. So maybe it was still a mechanical valve, but they didn't give anticoagulation. Is that possible?
no, sir. Mechanical valve without anticoagulation, you don't.
But is there any mechanical valve where some people don't give anticoagulation? Some people, believe that in the aortic position, mechanical valve, you can manage without anticoagulation, two antiplatelet agents alone. But that is not correct. But some people do it, and especially if the patient has complications with anticoagulation, sometimes they do avoid anticoagulation in aortic position. But then I think if there is no anticoagulation, the mechanical valve is very unlikely. Now, is it possible that his misunderstanding valve was replaced? Something else could have been done? I am also guessing. I also don't know what he had. Anything else could have been done which he is calling valve replacement has been done? Anybody else? What do you use for repairing a mitral valve? What prosthetic device you use? You want to use the annuloplasty ring.
Yes, sir.
So, maybe the patient might have been told we have inserted a annuloplasty ring in the mitral valve, and possible that he is mistaking it for a valve implant also. That's also possible.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Yes.
Because the absence of anticoagulation makes a mechanical valve very unlikely. Okay. So he had a 2-valve surgery, 1 repair, 1 replace according to him, and then he remained well for a period and deteriorated now. Why do you think he deteriorated now? 10 years after the previous surgery, why is he deteriorating?
Patient was not on medications, and the valve would gone for degeneration.
But you have done a repair, and therefore, why do you need medication? You don't need medication.
One valve was only repaired, so the disease would have progressed.
So what is the proper answer to my question? You're not telling the correct answer. The possibilities why the patient deteriorated late after surgery are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have to enumerate like that. These are all common questions we ask every day in the ward. What are the cause of deterioration in a operated valvular heart disease? That's a simple question.
Development of atrial fibrillation, sir.
Yeah, first and foremost is residual lesion after the previous surgery.
Okay, sir.
Second is recurrence of the lesion. Maybe they operated mitral incompetence, repaired it, and now mitral regurgitation has recurred. Third is recurrence of rheumatic fever. Don't you think it can happen in a boy who is not on penicillin?
Yes, sir.
So, residual lesions, recurrence of the lesion, recurrence of acute rheumatic fever, development of atrial fibrillation. Then, what else? What are other causes of deterioration in a valve? Degeneration of the prosthetic material, and then infective endocarditis. Then growth of the patient, the valve or the device becoming inadequate for his body size. It was put in when he was 10 years old. Now he is 26 years old. How can that ring or valve be adequate for him?
Yes, sir. Process is mismatched, sir.
Huh?
Process is mismatched, whatever, sir.
So, why don't you tell me all this then? When I ask you why is a patient developing symptoms late after surgery, residual lesion, recurrence of lesion, recurrence of rheumatic fever, occurrence of endocarditis, degeneration of prosthetic material, patient outgrowing the size of the prosthetic device, development of atrial fibrillation, thrombosis. So, I given you 8 causes of deterioration. When you keep these 8 causes in mind, and when you examine, when you make a diagnosis, you have to keep all these causes in mind. Even when you examine, you must look for evidence in support of one of those 8 causes. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go on to physical examination.
An examination. Patient is conscious, oriented, cooperative, and afebrile. Is thin built and poorly nourished. Has height of 164 centimeters and weight of 54 kgs. Arm span is 160 centimeters. Upper segment is 84 and lower segment 80 centimeters. The
You
ratio
know
is
what? I keep telling in every case presentation I have, this patient is symptomatic with dyspnea. You said class 3 or class 4 or whatever it is.
Yes, sir.
So the first physical signs slide should be in what posture he is sitting, whether he is in distress, whether he is tachypneic, whether he has indrawing of respiratory muscles, whether he is sweating, whether he has an IV line, whether he is on oxygen mask. Those are the physical signs I want in the first slide. I am not interested in conscious, oriented, thin, height, weight. These are all important. I am not saying not important. But don't you tell me the condition of the patient first before you go to these signs.
Yes, sir. Patient.
Right. I'm asking you, which is more important to me?
Yes, sir. Patient's
So that should be your first slide. I have a patient who is tachypneic at rest, showing activity of the respiratory muscles being hyperactive with indrawing. He is sitting up, leaning forward. He is having an IV line going, and he is on oxygen. He is looking anxious and sweating. Now that presentation is much better than saying he is conscious, cooperative, thin built, nourished, height and weight and all. No, it tells me the condition of the patient straight away. So tell me the condition of the patient first.
Yes, patient is in recommend posture. He is not dyspneic, and there is patient is not dependent on oxygen. He is comfortable at rest, lying down. Sir.
So he is a comfortable, stable patient at the moment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that you should tell me first. Okay, now you can go on.
Patient is thin built and poorly nourished. Height of 164 and weight 54 kgs. Arm span 160 centimeters. Upper segment of 84 and lower segment 80 centimeters.
Oh.
That's no features.
So what does it mean? Reading out segment and all doesn't mean anything. Tell me the interpretation.
There is no features of any Marfan syndrome. There is no.
What happens to the ratio in Marfan?
Lower segment will be more.
Okay. Go on.
There is no dysmorphic features or any musculoskeletal abnormalities.
Okay.
Patient is ectric. There is bilateral pitting pill edema is present. He's not pale. He's not cyanosed. There's no clubbing or lymphadenopathy. Peripheral signs of AR like Demasset sign, locomotor brachy, Quincke's pulsation, and Rosenbach's pulsation and top sign are present. Examination of vital examination. Pulse is 110 beats per minute. Regular, large volume pulse. Disfluence in character. Palpable in all peripheral vessels, and condition of vessel wall is normal. There is no radiofemoral or radioradial delay, and there is no pulse deficit.
Okay.
BP, upper limb BP right side is 120/40, left side is 120/50, lower limb BP is 130/50 on both lower limbs. Respiratory rate is 24.
Come on, 120/40. What is the interpretation, Baba? Reading out values, anybody can do. Even the nurse in the bedside can do for me. You are supposed to interpret your finding.
There is white pulse.
The exam also, this is what you do. You keep on reading your finding. What is the use of reading your finding? Tell me what 120/40 means.
The pulse pressure is wide side.
And?
Diastolic blood pressure is on the lower side.
Okay, so why don't you say that? Pulse pressure is wide and the diastolic pressure is low. Anything else you see there? Why did you record BP in the lower limb?
No, he was having signs of AR just to check for Hill sign whether to.
So why don't you tell me whether Hill sign is positive or not?
No, so Hill sign is negative. So difference is only 10.
So why don't? That's why I'm saying, when you tell me lower limb BP, you are supposed to interpret it for me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go on.
Respiratory rate is 24 per minute and thoracoabdominal. Say febrile. JVP is elevated. Is 10 centimeter from the middle end of the clavicle with patient in sitting posture. A waves are prominent. Large CV waves are seen, and Y descent is rapid. And there is absence of respiratory variation. There is no inspiratory fall in the JVP.
So you said JVP is elevated 10 centimeter from the medial end of the clavicle. So what do you think is RA pressure?
More than 20, more than 15, sir.
More than 15, how much? 30? Did you attend the class on JVP?
No, sir.
No. Okay. Somebody else can answer. I want to know what is the RA pressure. Guys, hello.
10 plus 5, sir. 15, sir.
Huh? $15. Who said 15? Surya. Hello?
Audible, sir?
No, you are not. Okay, why do you say 15? How did you say 15?
Sir, I added 5 centimeters sir, to the from the clavicle. We have measured 5 centimeter, and 5 centimeters should be added from the center from the RA, sir, to that clavicle.
I'm
So 5
confused
plus-
now. Something you are telling from clavicle 5 centimeters, another. So you how much you have to add to 10?
From 10 plus 5, sir.
10 plus 5. Why 5? What is that is from RA to clavicle is 5, is it?
We have to add 8, sir, medial end of clavicle.
Why?
From RA to angle of Louis, it's 5. And from there to medial end of clavicle, it's 3. So it is upper normal limit of RA pressure. We have to add 18, sir.
So you're right. So Surya, it is not 5 centimeters. 5 centimeters manubrium, the angle of the mandible, sternal angle, not mandible, sorry. The sternal angle to the center of the right atrium is 5 centimeters. And
Yes, sir.
the medial end of the clavicle is another 3 to 4 centimeters above the angle of the sternum. Therefore,
Okay,
you have to add 8 centimeters to the venous column height. Therefore, in this case, the venous column is 10 centimeters. The RA pressure will be 18.
Okay, sir.
18 what? 18 what?
18 centimeters of water, sir.
What? Suppose I want in millimeters of mercury.
Multiply by point. 0.7, sir. 0.67.
So how much will be roughly?
Around 10, sir.
Around 10. 18, it will become 10. Hey, when you don't multiply by point, you divide it. So the height in mercury in millimeters will be more than the centimeters of water. 18 will become 20 or 22 millimeters of mercury. Please go back and read.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When you convert centimeters of water to millimeters of mercury, the number becomes higher than the original value. 10 centimeters of water will be roughly equal to 12 millimeters of mercury. 18 centimeters of water will be roughly equivalent to 20 or 22 millimeters of mercury.
Yes, sir.
Please go back and have a look at the JVP slides.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, go on, Gokul. Now, you said Kusumal sign is positive.
Yes.
What are the causes of Kusumal sign?
RV failure is one probably. Constrictive pericarditis, restrictive cardiomyopathy.
Okay. So constrictive pericarditis should be the first cause of Kusumal sign, but any condition causing significant rise in the venous pressure can produce Kusumal sign. Okay? That includes cardiomyopathy, restrictive cardiomyopathy, congestive heart failure, tricuspid incompetence, everything. Okay,
Yes.
next slide.
On inspection and palpation, the stone is bilaterally symmetrical. Midline scar is seen. There is no kyphoscoliosis. Apical impulse is felt in the left sixth intercostal space along the anterior axillary line, and it is heaving in character. In grade 3, left-sided parasternal impulse is felt. Epigastric pulsations are felt. Palpable second heart sound is felt in the left second intercostal space. Diastolic thrill is felt at the apex. There is no carotid thrill. Supraclavicular and suprasternal pulsations are seen, and systolic liver pulsations are also seen. On percussion, left heart border corresponds to the apex and the right heart border is 1 centimeter lateral to the sternal border. Liver dullness starts from the right fifth intercostal space and extends to 8 centimeter below the right costal margin. The liver span is around 14 centimeters. The stomach tympan is on the left side. The left second intercostal space is dull. Next. On auscultation, S1 is soft, S2 is wide and fixed split, P2 is loud and A2 is soft. The S3 is felt both at the apex and the lower left sternal border. There is no S4 or opening snap or ejection sounds, or there is no rub, knock or click heard. High pitched blowing pansystolic murmur of grade 4 heard at the apex, aerating to the axilla. Heard with the diaphragm of the stethoscope with patient in left lateral position. And low pitched rough rumbling mid-diastolic murmur of grade 3 heard at the apex with the bill of the stethoscope with patient in lateral position. Next slide. The high pitched blowing pansystolic murmur of grade 3 at the lower left sternal border heard at the diaphragm. The high pitched decrescendo early diastolic murmur of grade 3 is heard at the left third intercostal space with patient leaning forward. A medium pitched crescendo decrescendo ejection systolic murmur of grade 3 is also heard at the right second intercostal space, patient leaning forward. Other system examination. Respiratory system, dullness and reduced air entry in the right infrascapular and right infraaxillary areas and the interscapular areas. On abdominal examination, free fluid was present and liver is palpable 8 cm below the right costal margin. Smooth in consistency and rounded edges, and the systolic pulsations are felt. There is no splenomegaly, and the central nervous system examination was normal. Diagnosis.
Okay. Can you show the palpatory slide once more? Apex beat and all that. Next one, forward. You are not committed to apical impulse anywhere. What type of apex?
The previous
Oh, here, okay, here you are done. Left intercostal space, anterior axillary heaving apex. Okay. Go on.
final diagnosis. Multivalvular heart disease of rheumatic etiology, post valvular surgery, severe AR, severe aortic regurgitation, severe mitral regurgitation.
No, wait a minute. You said it was a valve, no prosthetic valve. So you didn't describe any prosthetic valve sounds and all. You didn't hear anything else.
No, sir, no
But
prosthetic.
did you specifically say in your finding no prosthetic valve sounds?
No, sir, I didn't mention.
You have to mention.
Yes.
Because you don't know what surgery has been done. So you have to let the examiner know that you specifically look for prosthetic valve sound.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Right. Go on.
Severe aortic regurgitation with severe mitral regurgitation, severe pulmonary artery hypertension, patient biventricular failure, patient in sinus rhythm, no evidence of infective endocarditis or rheumatic fever, rheumatic activity, and patient in functional class 3.
Two deficiencies in this slide. One is no, you're forgetting one important lesion, no? What about tricuspid incompetence? You didn't mention that.
Severe TR, sir. Severe.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
That's a very, because if you forget to write TR in your final diagnosis, no, surgeon will operate and forget to repair the TR. Do you want that?
No, sir.
Then you can't afford to forget a diagnosis. Okay. Now severe MR, severe AR. Between the two, you think AR is dominant, is it?
Yes, sir. Pulse pressure is wide and peripheral signs are seen.
Okay. What pulse pressure is wide? How much? 120 by 40, 80 millimeters. Why can't it be predominantly MR, severe MR as a dominant lesion? You got a apex which is very much deviated down and out. You got a MDM at the apex. Do you want to? You feel that AR still is the dominant lesion?
Yes, sir.
I can't hear you.
I think predominantly AR is the predominant lesion.
Okay. Suppose a person has AR, another person has MR. Which one do you think will present earlier with symptoms and signs of heart failure, like this patient?
MR patients will go for pulmonary congestion earlier.
No, you're not answering my question. Between aortic and mitral valve disease, who is likely to come with worsening heart failure, pulmonary hypertension, right-sided heart failure and all that earlier?
Mitral regurgitation.
See, it is the mitral regurgitation which is directly causing pulmonary hypertension. AR is causing volume load for the left ventricle, whereas mitral regurgitation directly elevating the LA pressure. Therefore, pulmonary hypertension develops much earlier in MR as compared to AR. And therefore, I would expect that this patient is relatively young still, 26 years, and is only 10 years after his surgery. So, if he's coming back with recurrence of heart failure and especially right heart failure, I would expect his mitral disease to be more severe than probably contributing more to his clinical picture than the aortic. I'm not saying AR is not severe. AR is also severe, I agree. But I would expect the mitral disease to be the predominant cause of his trouble. I would opt for mitral regurgitation as the dominant diagnosis.
Okay.
What is the evidence of severe PAH?
JVP is elevated and prominent A waves are seen, and P2 is loud.
No, you didn't say A wave. You said CV waves are prominent.
A wave is also prominent.
No, in other words, how do you judge the severity of PAH clinically? That's all I want to know.
Loud P2. Loud.
All PAH have loud P2.
Right parasternal heave is also present, grade 3.
Okay, so severity of the right ventricular heave. If the heave is very strong, it's probably more suggestive of more severe PAH. What else? Anybody else? No?
Wide split S2.
By the way, you have mentioned wide fixed split S2.
Yes.
How do you explain wide fixed split S2 in this patient?
RV failure, so RV non-compliant, so it cannot accommodate any more blood, so the split is fixed.
Okay. Possible. Yes, agreed. So, generally the examiners like to associate wide fixed split second sound with atrial septal defect. So, if you're using wide fixed split in other conditions, you must have an explanation ready. I agree with you. Right bundle branch block, severe right ventricular failure can cause a wide split second sound, and you are unable to make out the movement of the P2 with respiration. Therefore, apparently it is fixed. Okay?
Yes.
So, I think you must be careful in saying it is wide fixed split second sound or apparently wide fixed split second sound. There is a difference. Can you note the difference between the two?
Okay.
In one, it appears to be wide fixed. In another one, you say it is wide fixed. That is the way to present.
Okay.
Okay. Generally, examiners like to associate wide fixed split second sound with ASD. And they may not like it if you say it is due to right heart failure. So you say the wide second sound is widely split and looks like wide and fixed split, but possibly due to right ventricular volume overload. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now, none of you attended yesterday's SRMC PAH. Dr. Kothari told you how to guess this height of the PS systolic pressure from the second sound? None of you attended the PH symposium yesterday? You know, normally the P2 is heard only in the pulmonary area. As the PA pressure goes up higher and higher and higher, it becomes audible more and more extensively. Therefore, roughly starting with the second space, as it becomes audible in the third space, fourth space, fifth space, sixth space under the apex. If the second sound P2 is audible at the apex, then the PA systolic pressure must be 70 or above.
Okay, sir.
In fact, he even showed a diagram of it, intercostal by intercostal. Yes? Nobody attended? Some of you must have attended yesterday. Surya, Amudan?
No, sir, got stuck on duty, sir, yesterday evening.
Come on. There are 12 of you there. All of you are stuck on duty? Okay. Anyway. So, right. So, severe, in this case, second sound was it audible at the apex? The P2? The wide fixed split, whatever you say. Was it apparent at the apex?
No, sir, it was,
What, yes or no?
no, sir.
No, okay. So you have to guess from the second space how far down it is audible. The more distance is audible, higher the PA pressure. That is one way of reading it. Secondly, it's by the severity of the right ventricular heave. Third is by the severity of TR. If the TR is severe, then we assume that the PAH must be severe. Especially if the murmur of TR is very loud and long. Because a non-hypertensive TR will produce a very short systolic murmur. Like Epstein's murmur, very short. A low pressure TR always produces a short, soft murmur. Whereas if you have a very loud and long murmur, it's most likely suggestive of hypertensive TR. Okay? So from this loudness of the second sound, from the loudness of the right ventricular heave, from the loudness and the length of the systolic murmur, and finally, if there is a Graham-Steele murmur.
Okay.
Everybody know what is a Graham-Steele murmur?
Pulmonary regurgitant pulmonary.
So, presence of a pulmonary incompetence murmur indicates generally severe PAH. Presence of an audible Graham-Steele murmur, okay, indicates, even normally all these people have a PR on echo. That is not what I am saying. A audible PR murmur indicates severe pulmonary incompetence. And therefore it indicates severe pulmonary hypertension. Okay. So, severe MR, severe AR, PAH, TR, biventricular failure class. Okay, let's go to the investigations. What do you have? X-ray?
Yes.
It's a fairly straightforward case, nothing much to discuss on physical science and all. Therefore, you must be very, very careful and prepared to answer a lot of questions on investigation and further workup, prognosis, natural history, then decision regarding surgery, follow-up after surgery, all those things. Those are the areas where Kiraman will grill you if the physical science are straightforward. Okay, come on, ECG finding, quick.
Yes. 12 lead ECG, so normally standardized. Patient in sinus rhythm. Axis is plus 60 degree. A rate of 90, around 100 beats per minute. And that is left atrial enlargement as evidenced by P terminal force in V1 is more than 40 milliseconds and notched P waves in lead 2. And there is also evidence of left ventricular hypertrophy, probably volume overload and left ventricular volume overload as evidenced by small Q waves in V6.
Okay, so does it is it compatible with your diagnosis?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, fine. Go to the X-ray.
Yeah, I'll show, sir. It's not attached, sir. I'll
Oh, okay. Okay, ask him to just present the finding if he doesn't have the image.
Sir, one doubt, sir.
Yes.
Sir, in the presence of RV dysfunction, if the patient has developed RV dysfunction, can this TR and other signs of PH can it come down, sir? The severity can it come down, sir?
Yes, it can come down. Yes. Definitely. If RV dysfunction happen, then the loudness of the TR murmur, the length of the TR murmur can come down. Yes.
Okay, sir.
One thing in this patient, liver has systolic pulsations. How to differentiate whether it's AR due to AR or due to TR? So any means of differentiating?
You think AR can produce systolic pulsation in the liver?
Rosenbach sign.
Huh?
The Rosenbach sign. How to
What is that sign? Tell me.
systolic pulsations in liver?
See, are you talking of transmitted pulsation from the aorta through the liver?
Yes, in AR. Yes.
Okay. See, the typical pulsation of TR is what is called an expansile pulsation. If you actually, the correct method of examining for systolic expansile pulsation of the liver is a bimanual palpation. One hand behind and one hand in front, and you feel that the liver actually is expanding between your two hands. Okay?
Okay.
So it will be a slow expansile pulsations of the liver. Whereas the AR pulsation will always be jerky, short-lived. Just like the pulse. The difference between carotid pulse and the V wave in the jugular vein. That is the difference.
Okay, sir.
Okay, X-ray is there. Come on.
X-ray. PA view. Adequate penetration. Trachea and midline. There is cardiomegaly. Cardiothoracic ratio of around 0.6. There is probably LV type of apex, and it's also
Why probably?
Okay, it's LV type of.
Yeah, LV is, the apex is dipping down nicely into the diaphragm.
Yes, sir. And right atrial enlargement is also seen.
I don't agree with that. Right atrium is not enlarged. It's not in this X-ray. It's a rotated film, so but still you can't see RA enlarged. Okay.
And main pulmonary artery is dilated.
Is that compatible with your diagnosis?
Yes, a severe PAH. Yes.
Well, PAH severe. How can you say from X-ray? But yeah, main pulmonary artery is prominent. I agree, but the hilar artery is not very big. You cannot see it. It's very penetrated X-ray. I would say the lungs are so dark. I don't think it's a good penetration. I thought you said a good X-ray. Can you see the bones are seen through and through? The lung fields are extremely dark, and you're not seeing any pulmonary blood vessels. I don't think it's a good X-ray. It's very penetrated. Anyway, let's go to the echo now. Have you got the echo pictures or report? What do you have?
Pictures.
Okay. Yeah. What does it show?
It's not playing.
No, don't. That's all right. You just interpret the still image. I know it's not plain.
PLAX view of showing dilated left atrium,
Okay. Just dilated or massively dilated?
massively dilated.
Why didn't you use very dilated, very large LA? Something you should say.
Yes, sir.
Then
And LV is hypertrophied. And coming to valves, mitral valve is thickened. Leaflets are thickened. There was also dooming, AML dooming was also seen. And aorta appears to be normal.
aorta is not very well seen. Don't try to look at it. Not very well seen here. Okay. Next.
Yes, color Doppler image showing AR is severe AR.
Why do you say severe AR?
The diameter of the AR jet is more than 50% of the LVOT diameter.
Okay. Then
Next slide, sir. LV is not, and this LV is not dilated. So LV IDD is only 4.6 centimeters. Next slide, sir. It shows severe AR.
Yeah, here you can see the width of the AR jet very nicely. It is more than 60% of the LV outflow tract. So indicating of LV, the AR which is more than 7 millimeters, that's also another sign. So, and the AR jet is quite long, extending into the LV cavity. Therefore, it's clearly a case of severe AR. Okay. Next.
This Pica 3 chamber V showing the MR jet. So MR is also severe.
Why severe?
Jet area is around more than 8 centimeters. It is occupying almost 50% of left atrial area.
Something more important. The jet is
impinging the posterior wall up to the
jet is wide at the beginning and it's going right up to the roof of the LA.
Yes.
Okay. Next.
This is showing aorta is not much dilated. Sir.
Okay.
It was actually short axis view of aortic valve, calcified aortic leaflets. Planimetry was around 1.06 centimeters.
Is that a good way of measuring aortic valve area?
But ideal will be continuity equation, but in the presence of AR.
Next.
So showing turbulence across the aortic valve. PR jet is also, pulmonary regurgitation jet is also seen. Short axis view showing calcified mitral leaflets with commissural fusion, and interventricular septum is flattened, and RV is hugely dilated.
Okay. Good.
This suggests RV pressure overload. Planimetry of mitral valve area is around 0.8 centimeters, signifying significant mitral stenosis. The main pulmonary artery is mildly dilated, just 2.6. Just about 2.4 is usually 2.5. Right?
Okay.
This again short axis view at the level of papillary muscles, again showing flattening of ventricular septum. So, the ECOS method calculation of ejection fraction was around 42%.
Okay.
Next slide. Next slide. Using Simpson's biplane, it was also around 40% moderate LV dysfunction. Apical four-chamber view, showing grossly dilated both the left and right atrium, and also right ventricles also dilated. Mitral leaflets are calcified and thickened. Next slide. Showing the gradient across the mitral valve. So the maximum gradient was 22 and mean gradient was around 12. That is also showing significant mitral stenosis.
Okay.
Next slide. The mitral valve annulus is around 4 centimeters, so there is annular dilatation is also seen. Next slide, sir. This is again showing a significant MR. Two-chamber view. Two-chamber continuous wave Doppler showing a dense that is also signifying severe MR.
Okay.
Again, four-chamber view, RV focused view showing RV tricuspid annulus is 4.7. It's a significantly dilated tricuspid annulus and mid-cavity diameter of 5.4. That is also signifying RV dilatation. Next slide. Biopsy of around 10 millimeters, so signifying moderate to severe RV dysfunction. This slide actually shows severe TR is also present.
Yeah.
Next slide. This shows a significant TR with TRPG around 80 millimeters. The apical five-chamber view showing mean gradient across aortic valve of 22 millimeters.
Okay.
Around moderate AS. This again four-chamber view showing AR jet, significant regurgitant jet. Quantifying AR using pressure half time, 215 milliseconds. Also significant AR. This slide is suprasternal view showing turbulent jet in descending arch and descending thoracic aorta. Next slide. Pulsar Doppler across the aorta showing hollow diastolic flow reversal. But the arch and descending aortic dimensions are normal, not dilated. This shows subcostal view showing grossly dilated IVC without any respiratory variation.
Okay, so I agree with your, echo, your record in reports is correct. But one important thing you didn't describe. Remember, we didn't know whether the valve was been replaced or repaired, and then I said maybe a mitral valve ring has been put, and then whether aortic valve been replaced or mitral valve. We've all done that. You never commented on that in anywhere in your echo report.
Mitral valve ring, nothing was
So who will report that?
not seen.
Did you report it? Not seen is also a finding, no?
Yes, sir.
First of all, you didn't report that there is no prosthetic valve in the heart. Secondly, you did not say that I did not see a mitral valve ring. Okay? And did the mitral valve look like a native mitral valve, or does it look like a bioprosthetic? Is there any difference between bioprosthetic valve and native valve in a 2D echo? Can you identify between them?
Yes, sir. Can we differentiate? This is looking like a native valve only.
Huh?
For this
I
patient,
don't know. I think a native valve, if a bioprosthetic valve is without a ring is there and implanted, sometimes it looks exactly like a native valve. You may not be able to make out, except in short axis. In short axis, if you have a fish mouth appearance, it has only can appear with a native valve. A fish mouth appearance can never appear with a bioprosthetic valve. A bioprosthetic valve, how many leaflets does it have?
3 leaflets.
3 leaflets. A native mitral valve has only 2 leaflets. So it is a short axis view which tells you that this boy's mitral valve is native mitral valve.
Yes, okay, sir.
Okay. So the native mitral valve is there and no mitral valve ring is there. On the other hand, the aortic valve is very thickened and calcified, which is unusual for a boy of only 20, a young man of 26. For aorta and aortic valve to get calcified is a little unusual. No? Native aorta and aortic valve disease doesn't get calcified so fast. Therefore, the very fact that aorta and aortic valve is so calcified indicates that it may be bioprosthetic tissue.
Yes.
Therefore, at the end of echo, you should have told me, without reading the report, that his mitral valve was probably repaired last time and the aortic valve has been changed by a biological valve.
Okay.
That conclusion you must be able to tell me from the echo without looking at the report.
Yes, sir.
Now, if you don't describe the findings and just tell me the diagnosis, then I know that you're reading the report. So when you're reporting long axis view, apical view, this description should come out of your mouth. I don't see any prosthetic valve. I see a normal looking mitral valve structure. It could be a native mitral valve. Especially in short axis, it has a fish mouth appearance. Therefore, I think it is a native mitral valve. On the other hand, I also don't see any supravalvular mitral repair ring. Whereas in the aortic valve, I see extensive calcification and this thing, which is unusual at this age, and therefore that is probably dead tissue, biological tissue, which has been used at previous surgery, which has got calcified. That is the type of description I want.
Okay.
Now, so now we know that the report. Once you if you had told me that before you showed me this report, I would have given you some extra credit. So, echo report shows that he has had a mitral valve repair and homograft aortic root replacement. Homograft is also a biological valve which has got calcified.
Yes.
Right. So it must have been a combination of mitral stenosis, mitral incompetence, which they operated last time and repaired it. Okay. Right. What else is important in this report? Anything else you want to tell me in the report?
No vegetations.
Huh?
No vegetations are seen.
Okay. What else? Is there one more page of the echo report or only this much?
Yes, one more page is there.
Yeah, sure. One more important finding I'm looking for, if you can help me. What am I looking for?
Tricuspid annulus size.
Huh?
Tricuspid annulus size.
Exactly. When you describe TR, you are supposed to tell me whether it is organic TR or functional TR. Gokul, are you listening?
Yes, sir.
No. So, if it is organic TR, your description didn't tell me whether there was any evidence of tricuspid stenosis, whether there is any thickening of the tricuspid leaflet, whether there is any doming of the tricuspid valve, you didn't tell me. Now, if it is functional incompetence, I have to decide whether he needs tricuspid valve repair or not at the next surgery. And how do you make the decision about tricuspid valve surgery?
Tricuspid annulus.
Tricuspid annulus more than 40 millimeters is an indication for the surgeon to repair it.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
So where is the tricuspid annulus here? Measurement.
Not mentioned, but in the echo measurement is measured. So it's more than 40 millimeters.
Where is it measured? I didn't see that.
It's shown, describes.
Previous page?
No, sir, it is not in the report, sir, but in the images I have shown. Sir.
Okay, but then you should tell me that. No, you didn't tell me that. If you don't tell me, it is as good as that you don't know. In the examination and if you don't point out a finding, if you don't report it, write it down, it is considered that you have missed the finding. Okay?
Okay.
So now what is the total diagnosis? Rheumatic heart disease, operated mitral valve repair and homographed aortic root replacement. Now degeneration of both the valves. Now he's got moderately severe MS and severe MR, severe AR, mild moderate AL, severe PAH, TR, LV dysfunction, RV dysfunction, and dilated tricuspid annulus. Yes?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Right. What is the next step?
We have to advise surgery for the patient.
So the next step is surgery. Straight. Go. Do you need any more workup? In other words, I am asking you. Any more workup?
No, sir.
You didn't talk of LA appendage also, by the way. LA appendage clot.
It was not imaged. Patient was never in AF, so
No, you cannot have a clot. AF increases the frequency of clot. MS is a more important lesion for clot than MR. Therefore, his chances of having a clot is little less, I agree. But still, as part of completion of report, you must have it.
okay, sir.
So, any more assessment you want, or is he ready for surgery?
So assess mortality for surgery assessment using
Huh? I can't hear you.
assess surgical mortality. We have to assess
So, the surgical mortality, how do you do that?
STS score. Or,
In a 26-year-old person, you want to do STS score? Why? Okay, you can do it, I agree. But something more important here, I am not talking of STS score and all. Something common garden. Don't you want to make sure that he doesn't have rheumatic activity now?
yes, sir.
Can he have rheumatic activity now?
Possible, but from etiology and from history and examination, there is.
No. Once he has established heart disease, you think physical examination is a reliable way of excluding rheumatic activity?
Oh, so we have to do CRP, ESR.
Yeah, at least you have to do a basic test of ESR, CRP and
Yes.
ASLO titer.
Yes.
Don't you want to check his hemoglobin? Why he is having so much of symptoms? So, tell me the workup, no? You don't send the patient from OPD to theatre, isn't it? Do you send the patient from your OPD straight to theatre?
No, sir.
Then? Tell me the workup, no? What else will you work up? So you will do at least a basic workup of the hemogram and to rule out rheumatic fever activity. Anything else you would like to do? He's been on diuretic for such a long time. Do you want to do something else?
Renal functions and electrolytes.
Yeah, you have to check his electrolytes and urea creatinine. If he has been taking lots of diuretic for a long time, what will happen to the urea?
Urea will rise and he's also having low output, so renal assembly could be possible.
So you have to do the basic workup. Even risk assessment for surgery involves in checking out liver function. Don't you want to do liver function test, INR? You think his INR will be normal or increase?
INR is elevated, bilirubin is elevated.
But you never told me all this. You never said you will do this test. Don't you want to do this test? You said he is icteric, but you never told me that you want to do LFT.
Yes, sir.
See, that's the problem. No? You people, the moment you have an ASD, you will say ASD device closure. The moment you have a valve leakage, you say I'll do a double valve replacement. That is exactly what the examiner doesn't want. He wants you to approach the patient as if you are doing it in real life.
Okay, sir.
So your job as a cardiologist is to do a total assessment of the patient, not only refer for double valve replacement.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you do a blood test. Do you want to do a TE in him? Any indication for transesophageal echo?
Indications LA clot and rule out LA clot and
No. I did ask you. Yes, if I do TE, I can do a rule out LA clot. But do you want to do it or not? You answer my question.
this patient, no, sir.
Not needed. Why not needed? Because it doesn't give any new information. Anyway, he has to undergo change of both aortic valve and mitral valve. And therefore, it doesn't add anything to the thing. If you are considering repair of any of the valves, then yes, TE has a role. But I think in this case, I think it's second time onward, it will probably be a replacement, and for the TE probably doesn't have any role. Would you like to do a cardiac cath or not?
Information, almost all the information in the echo itself we have got, sir.
It is available already.
Yes.
Okay. So you don't think cath is necessary?
No, sir.
Okay. You are so doubtful, no? If you are so doubtful, no, the examiner will catch your neck. So when in senses you are doubtful means he will jump on you. If you feel it's not necessary, you should be confidently and say loudly, yes sir, I don't think we'll get any more information from cath, therefore I think it is not necessary.
Yes, sir.
What is the annulus size in the aorta, by the way?
Aorta was normal only. Aortic annulus was not dilated, so it was normal only.
That doesn't tell me anything. I asked you annulus size. We have to decide what size aortic valve I can put. What size homograft was used in him?
So he was not having any details of the previous surgeries.
Okay, so he didn't have details. Then it's all the more important. Then we should measure it. Please go through your findings again and check later on and see. They must have measured the aortic annulus.
Aortic annulus was 16 millimeters.
15 or 16?
16, sir, yes.
Okay. So, is that adequate, inadequate, large, small? Something. See again, don't tell me 16. Tell me what 16 means.
Not adequate for this.
So, what is the problem? Anyway, you are going to change it, no?
Yes, sir.
16 valve, so anyway you are going to change it. So, why are you worried about 16 then? Anybody else?
So patient, it's only 16, sir, very small annulus. Even if we put a 19 size valve, the patient can develop patient prosthetic mismatch, sir.
So,
So we have to
by the
index
way,
it,
you can't put a 19 valve in a 16 annular. No, the 3 millimeters oversize is not possible. So, the answer is, if it is really 16, I think 16 may not be correct, maybe yes, 17, 18 anyway, but even 17, 18 is small for him. It's a very small annulus, and therefore it is cannot take an adequate size aortic prosthetic valve. The best size prosthetic valve you would like to insert is at 21 or 23 at least. And if it is 16 millimeters annulus, it definitely cannot take it. So then what do you do? So these are the things which examiner is looking for, no? Any technician can say, okay, he has AR, MR, so we have to do double valve replacement. We don't need a cardiologist to say that.
Sir, we need to plan for aortic root dilatation along with valve
How do you
implanting.
dilate? With a balloon? How do you dilate? It's not dilatation. It's actually surgical enlargement of the aortic annulus. Cannot be dilatation is something you do by balloon and all that. It is not dilatation. It is enlargement. They cut across the annulus, enlarge it so to take a bigger valve. There are different types of aortic annulus enlargement procedures can be done, but one of the ones you must be aware in MMM, you must be aware. Have you heard of the operation when they open into the right ventricular outflow? They cut the aorta and the LV outflow anteriorly so that it opens into the, so they create a VSD in effect, and then put a patch so as to enlarge the aortic annulus. Okay?
Okay, sir.
So
Okay.
this aorta may need surgical enlargement before you can put an adequate size prosthesis valve.
Yes.
Among the implantable valve, which has the better valve area? You've got many valves, no? Mechanical valve, bioprosthetic valve, homograft valve, Ross operation. Which can give the best valve area? The aortic position.
Bioprosthetic, sir.
Huh?
Bioprosthetic.
Anybody else?
Ross, sir, Ross procedure.
Explain what is Ross, no, for the benefit of others.
The replacement of the patient's pulmonary valve into the aortic position, and in pulmonary position will be putting a bioprosthetic valve, sir.
Yes. So Ross operation is basically you cut out the pulmonary valve of the patient and you implant it in the aortic position. That is the best one because you are giving a patient's own tissue into the aortic position and the pulmonary valve is very large in size. The second best, which is the second best?
Homograph, sir.
Homograft. Third best?
Bioprosthetic valve. And the least is
Yes. So you must know that answer, Gokul.
Transcatheter aortic valve implantation, sir, TAVI.
That gives even smaller valve, madam, because it sits inside the annulus. Therefore, the best valve to be given is Ross valve. The second one will be homograph. The third will be bioprosthetic valve or a transcatheter valve. And the last will be a mechanical valve. In that order.
Okay, sir.
So, surgery is not such simple. He needs 2 valves replaced and 1 valve repaired first of all, mitral and aortic replacement, and he needs tricuspid valve repair. Secondly, it is a redo operation, so his chest is full of adhesions. Thirdly, he is quite sick patient with severe pulmonary arterial hypertension and congestive heart failure, hepatic dysfunction, and maybe, I don't know, kidney dysfunction, I have no idea. So it's got 3 negative factors already. On top of it, you have to do aortic root enlargement, which is a major procedure in itself. Therefore, now these are the things, in discussion, because this is a straightforward AR-MR case. It's an MBBS case, not a DNB cardiology case. So if you get this case, I will be asking questions about repair, planning of surgery and those things other than diastolic murmur or systolic murmur. So this patient is a high risk case for surgical intervention. What is the normal risk of a single valve replacement? Any idea, Gokul?
2%. Sir.
Huh?
Mortality 2%. Single valve replacement.
2%. You must be in a very, very high, extremely high good result center. Any average valve replacement, aortic valve is said to be around 2 to 4%, and mitral valve around 4 to 6%. That's the worldwide figures. If you have a double valve replacement in a sick patient, the mortality increases. It increases to 10 to 15%. And then on top of it, you have a aortic valve root enlargement. You have to add to the mortality. Now all that information you have to tell me. And then because when we come to management, I am going to ask you, how will you counsel the patient? If you had told me that all these risk factors, then you would be in strong grounds to tell me that I will counsel him that his surgical mortality is likely to be in the range of 15 to 20%. Is that important or not?
Yes, sir.
So you must remember it's not a straightforward case. What medication he is on? You never told me what medication he is on.
He's on diuretic Lasix. He's on beta
I don't know what
blockers.
diuretics.
Lasix, sir. He's on Lasix 40 mg BD.
And then
He's on beta blockers, beta lock 25 mg BD.
okay. What else?
And Alactone 25 mg OD.
Okay.
And digoxin 0.25 mg OD.
Okay.
And Cardase 2.5 BD.
That's it.
Yes.
What is missing? Come on, quick. No, it's already 4 o'clock. We only too much time. What is missing in that prescription? Anybody?
Penicillin, sir.
Don't you think penicillin is necessary, Gokul?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
Why didn't you tell me that then? He's only 26, no? Can't he have
Yes.
rheumatic recurrence now?
Must be on. Yes, sir.
I think.
Prophylaxis.
Huh?
Prophylaxis he must be on. Must be.
So when I asked you what is missing, you didn't tell me that. So penicillin is something which has been missed in this case. I don't know whether he has missed or whether the prescribing doctor has missed. That I don't know. So at least now you must not miss when you advise the patient and discharge the patient. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Right. Anyway, I think that's it. So tell me now what has been done for this patient and what is the plan or what is the plan in your hospital?
Yes, sir. And patient has been planned for a high risk double valve replacement.
Okay. Not yet done.
Not yet done, sir.
Okay. Right. He is in the hospital now?
No, sir. He was actually admitted in gastroenterology. Sir. So they are admitted as decompensated liver disease. He was evaluated for liver disease and they are asked for cardiology opinion. So that's how we found out.
Okay. What was the INR?
INR was 4.7.
So it's a very good case for discussion, not because of physical finding. Physical finding are very, very simple and straightforward. Because there's a lot of things to be discussed in the pathophysiology. We could discuss for easily another 2 hours into how heart failure develops, what are the secondary effects of heart failure, what is his natural history. What do you think will happen if you don't or do anything now for him?
Both ventricles has severely failed. So.
You're not answering my question. I'm asking you, if you don't operate or advise intervention, what is the natural history? I'm asking.
Patient prognosis will be poor only, sir.
Poor is not the same as telling me a natural history, no? Anybody in biventricular failure with ventricular dysfunction and terminal late stage of valvular heart disease, what is the outcome? What is what do you think is the percentage of survival in the next 1 year? What is the percentage of survival in the next 5 years? Is he a low risk? Is he a low risk candidate for follow up or high risk candidate for follow up?
High risk one.
What is high risk in cardiology?
So higher chances of mortality is high.
How high? 100%? In 1 year, 100% of patients will be died. Anybody else, please?
More than 5 to 6% mortality per year, sir.
No. More than 10% is considered high risk for valvular heart disease. 1 to 2%, 2 to 5%, 5 to 10%, more than 10%. 10%. So easily when a biventricular failure in a valvular heart disease end stage, the mortality is definitely high risk, 10 to 20% per year. Therefore, in 5 years' time, there is 75% chance, more than 50% chance he won't be alive.
Okay.
So that is the way you convince him. You have got a serious problem, you have got a high risk procedure, but without surgery, your chances of survival is very, very low. Your chances of surviving the first year is less than 70%. 20% chances, 25% chance you will die in the first year of follow-up. That is the way to talk to him.
Yes, sir.
I think you need the diagnosis is the least important. If I am the examiner and you tell me A or MR, I will give you just quarter mark. The entire 3/4 of the remaining mark will remain for discussion of management, prognostication, counseling, risk assessment, and medical management. I think you need to brush up your risk assessment, decision making, and work up towards surgery. Those things you must improve. Okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Any questions? Anybody got any questions?
Sir, how far is Hillside important?
I don't know. Your mic is making a lot of noise.
Hill sign, sir. How far is hill sign important in this case, sir?
No, in this case, it's not important because it's got a combination of AS, AR, first of all.
Yes.
Therefore, I don't think hill sign is very important. And I think you got enough evidence of severe AR, that's good enough. And hill sign, there's a lot of controversy about whether it genuinely indicates whether it's a true phenomenon or it's a really indicates severe AR. So you can read up hill sign a little bit for discussion.
Okay, sir.
Okay?
Sir, he has got already hepatic failure, sir. How to anticoagulate him for after surgery, sir? Will there be an
What do you think is hepatic failure due to?
because of congestion, sir? Right now.
So congestion is reversible or irreversible?
Reversible, sir.
Reversible. So most of the time congestive hepatic dysfunction improves when you relieve the hepatic venous congestion. Unless it has been very severe and very, very long standing. like sometimes it happens in failing Fontan patients or in gross tricuspid valve disease which has gone on for a long time, or in constrictive pericarditis with very high venous pressure going on for a long time. They develop hepatic fibrosis and hepatic nodularity also sometimes in Fontan patients, not in the other. Therefore, such patients may have residual hepatic dysfunction, but generally, hepatic dysfunction is reversible in heart failure. Therefore, I think one should be able to manage keeping a track of the INR and using frequent INRs to guide to the anticoagulation.
Okay, sir.
The important thing is once you put in a prosthetic material in the heart, vitamin K is something which you should be very, very careful about. So that can suddenly bring back the coagulation parameters to normal, and that may be disastrous in a prosthetic valve.
Okay, sir.
Okay? No more questions, I'll wind up. I think it was a good discussion. Thank you, Gokul.
Thank you, sir.
And just go and read up some of the points which I told you. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay then, I'll wind up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.